There was once a young man who dreamt of becoming a millionaire. At a young age, he had moved to Wall Street and tried his luck on the stock market. Unfortunately for the man, he was a terrible economist and frequently lost large sums of money. This continued for many years until one day the man met a special little girl that would change his life. Steve was jolted awake by the blaring of his alarm. He stumbled over to the closet, trying to overcome the sleep inertia that came with every early morning. The sun was only just rising above the tips of the nearby buildings. He quickly donned his good suit. Today was the first day of the new financial year, and Steve had to make sure he was one of the first to get to his office, to ensure he didn't miss out on any opportunities. As he made his way out of the door and onto the street outside, a small figure huddled up in blankets caught his attention. His mind first passed it off as another homeless person, a sad but undeniable populace found in this area. But as he took a closer look, he realized that under the blankets it couldn't have been anything larger than a child. He slowly pulled back the top of the blankets and was greeted by a pair of eyes. However, there did not seem to be any fear in them, only a slight curiosity. The face of a young girl was nestled under the dirty cotton, her face covered with dirt and grime. "Where are your parents?" "I don't know," came the reply. Even to an outsider, the internal struggle raging within Steve was clearly visible on his face. Surely he couldn't leave her here, but if he did something about it, she would have to tag along to the centre, and he didn't have time to drop her off at a police station. That was on the other side of the city. But what would that do to his image? He wanted to appear cultured and distinguished, but that certainly wouldn't be helped by a soiled girl following him around. In the end, the little angel on his right shoulder took over, as he led the girl to his car and let her hop in the passenger seat. He arrived at the centre and made his way across the floor, over to the large elevators on the back wall. His co-workers gave him a wide berth, obviously off-put by his companion. The trip in the elevator was painfully awkward, and Steve had never felt so relieved to arrive on his floor. He immediately paced across the room to his computer and got into his work before any more distractions popped up. He was about halfway through his trading and was researching the economic growth of a new software group when he felt a little hand grasp his sleeve. He looked down to see the little girl looking up at him with a frown on her face, and then she pointed to a television in the corner of his office that was currently displaying national news. Software union in turmoil after leadership spill. He turned down to the girl, who seemed quite pleased with herself. "How did you know?" His voice trailing off as she reached over and grabbed his keyboard, typing in the URL for a committee of grain farmers. It was not a group he would usually buy from, for grain was usually very volatile. She then tugged his sleeve again, handing him a local newspaper. "Locusts destroy Eurasian grain crops." The possibilities started whizzing through Steve's head. If there was no grain in Eurasia, that would create a shortage, which would in turn drive up the price of grain. And being entirely American owned and operating, this company would make a major profit. A couple of weeks passed, and Steve checked how his investment was going. The locust plague was over now, and grain from Europe was making its way back into the market. The figures that Steve saw, however, were like nothing he'd ever seen. A couple minutes later, Steve was back at the local orphanage. It was a drab place, cracked wooden walls and a rain-damaged roof. He wasn't quite sure what had driven him to come back, but here he was. The doorbell reverberated through the institution. The little old lady that opened the door seemed to reflect the orphanage in a weird sort of way. "Could I please talk to the girl I dropped off last week?" "Tabby?" came the reply. "Yeah, Tabby." After a couple of moments, he was once again greeted by the wide-eyed face he had left at the police station all those weeks ago. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, Tabby. I would like to offer you a job." As weeks passed, Steve would pick Tabby up from the orphanage and bring her back to his apartment to work for 2 hours at a time, and then drop her back at the orphanage for supper. Tabby proved that she was adept at reading the market, and she earned a lot of money on Steve's behalf over the next 6 months. After this period of time, Steve offered Tabby a job, and he finally achieved his dream and became a millionaire. He hosted a party for Tabby and the other children from the orphanage, and bought Tabby a gift as a way of saying thank you. It was a cute little kitten with the telltale stripes of a tabby cat. However, the millions did not seem to be enough for Steve. He began to take Tabby out of the orphanage for longer and longer periods of time, forcing her to work long hours into the night. Steve grew into a bitter man, for no amount of money Tabby made for him was enough to satisfy his greed. One day it became too much. The young girl made a bad call, lost a large sum of money. It would only have been a minor setback, but Steve went off, yelling, screaming. He decided that the cat he had given her was a distraction, his hands ripping the small animal from Tabby's grasp and stuffing it into a cage. He told Tabby he was selling the kitten, and with that, he left. By the time he returned, Tabby was gone. Over the next couple of days, he searched high and low through the entire city, desperate to find the girl that had earned his fortune. But the search was fruitless, and Steve never saw Tabby again. He slowly lost his money, gambling on high-risk investments that never came off. He found himself growing poorer and poorer as he aged. Steve passed away not long after losing the last of his fortune, a bitter and unhappy man who had squandered his chance at happiness through greed.